What's going on, everybody? We are here with Mr. Steve Fundaro.
I'm so excited to be here.
Welcome to Hang 10, everybody. It's an exciting day. Steve has been wanting to get on the show for a while since it started.
Big time.
Basically, this show is a collection of thoughts that we all have with each other in the weather studio.
In the first couple episodes, yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times, in a good way, that I've procrastinated work when it's Jeff, Brian, and I hanging out in the weather center because we just pull up something related to surfing and then we just go off on tangents for like 20 minutes.
Well, a lot of Google Maps searching for different parts of the coastline, not just here in Hampton Roads, but also like when you, for example, you lived out west for a while for
the West Coast,
the beginning of your career, and you explored a ton of waves. You got into surfing out there.
Yeah. And that's where I was introduced into surfing. I would say introduced into surfing more authentically. I started, growing up in the Garden State, New Jersey, spending summers at the Jersey Shore. You would occasionally rent a surfboard or borrow someone's out of their garage or like wherever, and like, I don't know what we were doing. Didn't have the paddle strength, being a 90-pound kid. Like, you don't know what, you know what I mean? You're just taking waves over the head, but you're like, oh, this is fun surfing. And it was tremendously frustrating. And then when I moved to the West Coast, I was like, my brother and I were like, you gotta surf. It's California. You got to pick it up. So I just went to Surf Shop. I think my first or second week there. It was in Capitola on 41st Street. In Capitola, that's right next to Santa Cruz. So basically Santa Cruz. At the end of 41st Street, it's a break called the Hook. Yeah. And that's like that's a pretty sharky break in terms of lineup and in terms of just rocks and stuff like that. But there's a surf shop right there, and found myself like a 710 fat, just like fun board.
Yep.
Still have it. Now it's like my beater board. I bought it from the surf shop, and they had there's cracks on it. So he just shoved wax in there and put duct tape on it. He's like, yeah, it'll be fine, whatever. You know what I mean? Got myself a classic O'Neill zip up the back 4-3 wetsuit, and then the rest was history. And it really was just trial by fire, taking a lot of sets over the head, cold water over the head.
Oh, yeah.
And I would think in the first couple months, got the hang of it. And then once I found myself at point breaks and started learning how the waves worked, then it started clicking so much better.
Right.
Then it was just then it was figuring out the timing of standing up and all that kind of stuff. And then rest is history.
Plus, being a meteorologist, you can kind of understand when the waves will get good, what conditions you kind of need just by your profession.
Yeah.
So it kind of aligns there.
Yeah.
Similar interests. And you mentioned kind of going into point breaks, getting into different kinds of waves. That's something where this episode's all about the difference between the East Coast and the West Coast, the surfing, not just the culture, but the actual breaks themselves, the waves themselves. And a big difference is most of the East Coast is sandy beaches, flat sandbars, shore breaks, while the West Coast, rocky breaks. Sometimes you're jumping off of cliffs. And if anybody's ever seen clips of Steamer Lane, a lot of those guys are jumping off the cliff there to get in the water.
Yeah.
Rocky bottoms, like you said, kind of sharky.
Spooky breaks too. And then the shore breaks, if you ever do find them, they're
gnarly.
Heavy.
Gnarly.
Yeah, they are heavy. And that's what I had thought going into California. I'm thinking palm trees and sandy beaches, because that's what you're used to. I was used to the sandy beaches on the East Coast. So I'm thinking, everywhere I go, it's just going to be a nice beach and I can go surfing. And I move out there, and this is in Monterey, California. This is the Monterey Bay. North side of the bay, Santa Cruz. South side of the bay is Monterey. Right. Carmel is there. Big Sur's farther south. About an hour and a half south of San Francisco, if you're trying to make reference here. So Central California. And I'm picturing nice, warm, sandy beaches, palm trees, and I get out there, and it's just rocky.
Here's Steamer Lane.
Yeah, and it's just rocky. It's cliffs. It's reef breaks, and I'm like, oh, this is different.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? How do I navigate this? A whole different thing. Tides play a huge factor because you got to get in and out of the water safely. If you're climbing down these rocks to get into the water and it's low tide, and you're like, oh, totally cool, but you surf for 2-3 hours, not knowing the tides. They work a little bit differently than the East Coast. Pacific has the weird half step tide thing. I forget what that's called. And then you try to come back in and it's high tide. And then you're like, where's the rocks? Where can I get in? And super, super dangerous there. Yeah. So that was a kind of a realization moment that I was like, well, this is more intense than just going paddling out.
And also,
like, you really gotta pay attention.
if you're just starting out, the West Coast can be pretty intimidating.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of that,
Yeah.
not only the waves themselves and the breaks, the locations, getting into the water being a challenge in its own right, but also kind of the competitive nature of
Yeah.
the West Coast, where I feel like on the West Coast, it's very like, it's very core. It's very
Yeah,
core,
well,
the areas sometimes.
And what's cool about surf cultures in general, I mean, they're all over the place. You know,
course.
your friend Ben Gravy, so they're in states that don't even have beaches. You know,
Yeah.
don't even have oceans. But what I found really neat in the surf culture on the West Coast, at least in that section of California, was that everyone surfed. You know, it was the folks the folks who are ringing you out at the grocery store, the liquor store, the guys in the surf shop, the carpenters, you know, the lawyers in the suits and ties. No matter what, so like 9 out of 10 people are surfing, you know, and it's just a cool way that everyone's been connected to the ocean.
Yeah.
And it's pretty neat. But that being said, we're using the word sharky out here. It can get competitive out there. And you got to learn how a lineup's working. You got to learn it quickly.
That's also anywhere, though. I feel like the West Coast kind of gets this reputation of, oh, there's always fights going down on the beach. These guys are gnarly. These guys are like very territorial. It's just as territorial on the East Coast too, but for maybe a different reason. On the East Coast, sometimes you can go 2 months without seeing a single wave. So when that first swell comes up, everybody's itching for that fix. Surfers are addicts. They really are addicts
to some good things.
Yeah, exactly. But when that first swell comes up, everybody on the East Coast is like, we all haven't surfed in 2 months, 3 months. Like now we're all scratching for our waves before work or whatever the case may be. West Coast, a little bit more consistent with the surf, but I feel like the surf history goes back a little further for the West Coast. It's more ingrained into everyday life, maybe for more people on the West Coast, just because of the consistency
and because
of the surf.
basically you can do it and you can score really good waves on the daily here. That I'm gonna play devil's advocate and flip it around here a little bit.
Yeah.
That being said, with the consistency of the waves on the West Coast, there almost is like a spoiled aspect of it, right?
Guys
We're
are more chilled
spoiled
out.
with waves, so we have them all the time. So everyone is waiting for that perfect wave, you know, and they forget to be grateful that they have waves all the time. I mean, look at that. That's when the big swell moves in at Steamer Lane. So that being said, so it's like, okay, we are so used to having waves all the time on the West Coast that we are not as grateful for the fact that we have them. So I'm going to say that the lineups were more intense and they were more intimidating and they were harsher. I can't tell you how many times that I got ripped into because I was still learning,
right?
You know what I mean? And I got a bigger board, so I'd wait out the back, and then I'd get one set coming in out the back, and then there'd be a guy snaking it up on the inside, but he would have the right of way, and I wouldn't know that, and he would rip me a new one, and I'd get yelled at and hoot and hollered at. But then here on the East Coast, since we don't have waves all that often, anytime there is a swell, everyone is just more excited about it. Everyone is happy about it. Everyone is more willing to share the stoke and share it with each other, because it's like, this never happens all the time. Like, we're getting waves all the time. Like, this is great. Like, I don't know. I've experienced it. Yes, there's a competitive nature of it, especially, if you're at some of those intimidating breaks down in Hatteras, down in Buxton, or sometimes in Virginia Beach here, or even up in Jersey, there's some waves, or like in Long Island, like there's some breaks where it's like big waves are coming in, and it's just like, you gotta do it right. You gotta be on it. But also at the same time, like, everyone's just stoked to be out there whenever time a swell comes in on the East Coast. So I've found that to be a little bit more forgiving over here.
On a day where it's maybe 2 to 3 foot on the East Coast, people are stoked. On a day where it's maybe 2 to 3 foot,
grumpy,
a little mushy out in California, guys are probably
it's very much just like, I'm not going out. It's like, not worth it. It'll be better tomorrow, because it will be.
It will,
you know what I mean?
Exactly.
We're here on the East Coast. It's like, you don't know when that next good one's coming. So when it's 2 to 3 foot, it's like you're out there. You're out there.
Yeah. So I mean, definitely differences across the board.
Difference.
But overall, the competitive nature between the East Coast and the West Coast is still there. Like, it's pretty similar.
Yeah.
People don't, I feel like
just
people
surfing in general.
People kind of make more when they talk about the East Coast versus West Coast, I feel like people talk too much about the differences when really everybody's just as stoked. Maybe for a different reason. Or whatever the case may be. But just different factors at play. We're going to take a quick break. We will come back, talk more about East Coast versus West Coast, kind of really what it takes for the East Coast to really produce some of the
good swells,
world class swells that the West Coast sees almost regularly. So
yeah,
almost
all the
regularly.
time.
Yeah. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. We are talking about the East Coast versus the West Coast, kind of the differences, but also the similarities.
Yeah, similar and surf culture, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's out there having a good time. But what you mentioned earlier is that I think, or maybe my opinion is the big differences just come from the geography of the way the coastlines line up,
Yep.
and just how the swells are produced.
Yeah, definitely the way the swells are produced is a big one because on the West Coast, a little bit of some, I guess, fun facts. The Pacific Ocean is huge.
It's massive.
I'm sure a lot of people know that.
Yeah.
It covers 30% of the Earth's surface.
It's huge.
The Atlantic,
huge.
on the other hand, only 20. Now, the Pacific is also 2 times larger. And essentially what you need to get waves is what's called fetch, just wind blowing over large portions of the ocean. You do that through big low pressure systems, big storms. In the Northern Pacific, you get those pretty regularly.
Yeah,
pretty regularly.
Big areas of low pressure kind of bombing out in the Gulf of Alaska,
Yes.
the Northern Pacific, and you mentioned fetch. The period at which that wind is blowing the waves tends to go over longer durations of, longer distances because there's no land out there in the Pacific to break it all up. So
Yeah.
like when it's just going,
Yep.
and it's producing.
And not
swell.
only that, the Pacific is also a lot deeper on average than the Atlantic, especially as you get near the coastline. So what we look for good breaks out west is you kind of want you want deep water out the back. That way all the energy from the waves that are offshore coming in from these storms can just maintain their energy, maintain their speed. Because as soon as you get waves to travel into shallow water, friction.
Yep, and it starts to slow
Slows down the wave.
energy.
It starts, the wave starts to peak and get bigger. But over time, if you have a really shallow continental shelf,
dragging it out from underneath.
drags
Yep.
it basically it acts like a sponge and sucks all the energy out of those waves. That's why the Georgia coastline,
Yeah, because it's shadowed.
very shallow.
Or I'll say the opposite. That's part of the reason why the Outer Banks do so well in terms of
closer.
swells, because you think of how far out the OBX is and how deep the water is right up to the shoreline. Same idea on the West Coast. I mean, the water is deep. And I'll tell you, Brian, you're out there surfing in it.
Yeah.
I got to get you out to parts of Central California. This break right here, this is in Carmel Village. Carmel Village. So the north side of that shot right here, that's Pebble Beach.
Yeah.
This is typically looks like a little mellow lake. There's like maybe a knee to waist high wave breaking at the shoreline, typically because it's shadowed by the Monterey Peninsula. This was a day where I think there was a 10 to 12 foot swell at like 18 to 20 seconds, which is just, I mean, you're getting swell periods 20 seconds or more. This was when I realized, I think I was living out there for maybe like 6 months. This is when I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, this is probably the biggest waves I've seen in my life with my own 2 eyes. And there are guys out there with guns.
Yeah.
With big wave guns.
wave
Like this is
surfboards.
like, I mean, you could see, is the guy going to drop in there on the right?
Those are people.
Those are people out there right there dropping in. I mean, that's like something.
You don't see.
I mean,
often on the
maybe
East
I don't know
Coast.
if like Mavericks or not, but like that's pretty big. And
That's
this is
big.
just like a regular tourist town.
Gotta get
so to
some clips
speak.
of Steve in here.
You know, and this is when I was first learning in Capitola Village. You know, there's that 7-8. What was that? That 7-8, 7-9 fun board.
But here's the
you know
thing,
what I mean?
that this wave looks, kind of small. This is West Coast. You'd think, oh, West Coast should be bigger than this. West Coast gets like this, like every day. Like
this was a
Yeah.
regular day out there. Pushing
Still,
80 degrees in
yeah.
the sun, probably waist to maybe stomach high waves out there. We're just having it was a great longboard break, and that's really where I started learning to navigate the board a little bit.
Here's Virginia Beach.
and then here's the difference between the East Coast. Yeah,
It's very similar, at least the wave that you just saw with Steve surfing, and then this one that I caught like a month ago. But this swell in Virginia Beach, we had to wait for like weeks on end just for something like this. Whereas Steve went into his backyard and caught a 2-3 foot day very easily.
very easily. But I will say the difference in here is that when this swell arrived, I bet there was a little bit more frequency in them because it was a shorter period
swell.
On the West Coast, on that break particularly, that would be Capitola Village. You want to Google Maps it. Google Maps is a really cool little spot. There would be times I'd be sitting out there waiting, and it'd be flat for a long
and
time.
even in these long period swells where it's this big, you can have lulls that go 20, 30 minutes, and then a bomb set comes like this.
And then a 5-6 waves comes in. I mean, I wasn't paddling out in this or not, but this is also when I started connecting the two together here, Brian, that swells come from a source and come from a storm system, particularly a large area fetch, because those breaks, that beach that we just showed you, I mean, that would be like a regular beach day. People would be lounging, having a good time. And then the next day, you're talking about 20-foot faces coming into the beach. And it's just like, oh my goodness, 3 days later, 2 days later, be flat again. You know what I mean? So that it really made me connect the dots between the weather aspect of the atmosphere and how it connects all the way down to the ocean. There was a break I remember on the Monterey Peninsula that would be flat. Yeah, absolutely nothing. And then there'd be a massive swell like that where every beach would just be dangerous. Like you go in there, you're potentially drowning. I mean, look at the rocks there that this stuff is breaking into. Exactly. Yeah, like only pros are out there with their guns.
Very experienced.
But there would be these nooks and crannies inside the bay, like kind of right where the boats would be docked up, because it'd be flat and swells wouldn't make it in there, but a big long period swell would wrap its way around the point and eventually come in, and you'd have like a fun wave break. And so it was kind of cool to see how some breaks would turn on when some swells would arrive, and most times they would just be like totally flat. So it's kind of cool to see how it all works. And part of that is just because the weather moves from west to east.
Yeah, so you have storms coming right into the coastline. Swell is traveling right into the coastline. On the East Coast, it's a little bit different. We have our essentially most of the time, our waves are moving opposite in the opposite direction that you want. So we have, west east flow. You have storm systems that are traveling offshore. The most common, I guess, type of swells that you kind of look for the East Coast are going to be your mid latitude cyclones, your fronts that you have your south wind out ahead of them, kicks up a little bit of wind swell. It's really short period, but at least there's something.
It'd be like a 6 to 8 hour window of waves. You know what I mean? You get this like tight little window, and that's it.
And remember Isaias, tropical storm in New Jersey. Geez, that swell, it came and went in 2 hours.
I believe
it was clean. There was a clean window in New Jersey for 2 hours, and then the waves turned off. It went so flat in one of the quickest spans I've ever seen. And that's just because our storms are traveling away from our coastline. We only have that short window of opportunity. And now what you kind of really do look for is your hurricane swells.
Because they are coming in towards the coastline. They're pushing the water towards the coastline. So you have that similar effect on the West Coast, where weather systems are moving towards land, pushing water towards land. And that's where the hurricane swells come in the favor of the East Coast, because as they travel across the Intertropical Convergence Convective Zone, I think it was ITCZ?
Yeah,
ITCZ?
Intertropical Convergence Zone.
Yep. That's basically just the subtropical region of the central Atlantic. They're moving from east to west, and then hopefully making that northerly turn so they're not impacting land by any means. But the whole time they're moving from east to west, they are pushing water out in front of them, producing swell. And this is where East Coast breaks light up.
Really light up. Here's an example of that. This is me surfing in New Jersey.
Was this Isaias?
This is no, this is not Isaias. This is really late in the hurricane season a couple years ago. This is like November. So one of our last little lows that got a try. I forget what name it was, but it was one of our last ones of the year.
Yeah, because you're in a wetsuit right there.
I was in a full wetsuit because there was also a trough swinging through, so cold air was coming in. It can get pretty gnarly, especially when you have those short windows, wind switching offshore. You're kind of tapping into that cold air. You're putting the wetsuit on. You're putting all the gear on. But this is how big it can get in New Jersey, and it can get way bigger than this too.
Oh yeah, we've had. I mean, I'll be honest, Brian. We've had way bigger days here in Virginia Beach, here in the Outer Banks. You've seen it, and you know it. You've surfed it, so it's really fun to see how quickly the ocean, in terms of surfing, can turn on and can amplify. Exactly,
go from
what you're just saying.
Yep, to this in maybe a day or two.
Yeah,
or this or. Let me pull up wrong picture.
Yeah, that's right. That's Steamer Lane right there.
To this.
To that, you know? And that's something cool as well that I never realized growing up. I always, growing up as a kid, just thought at the beach, certain locations and beaches have waves. Like
Right.
that was it. That was just what I thought, because anytime I would experience a beach, it would have some sort of wave action and it would be fun. I never connected the dots
Yeah.
as a young kid that these waves traveled from somewhere, from something to arrive. So in a way, the waves are kind of like a storm.
Yeah.
A storm doesn't last long. It's not there all the time. It shows up and then it moves on.
Yeah.
And you really see that here on the East Coast. I remember explaining that to a friend of mine in October. He's from Pennsylvania, so we were on the beach in October, and he's like, "This is wild. I've never been in the sand on a warm day in October. Like this is wild." And there were waves cranking in.
Yeah.
It was from some hurricane swell.
Tropical swell.
A couple
Yeah.
years ago. And I just remember saying, yeah, what's going to be awesome is that tomorrow this place is going to look like a lake. What do you mean? All these waves are just going to be gone.
Gone.
And that's not something you see on the West Coast, because those swells are traveling from west to east. They're moving into the coastline, that they don't just turn off. They take a day or
gradually
two. They
fade in.
gradually fade,
Yep.
or they gradually fade away, or fade into the coastline. And that's also why I think the West Coast gets the reputation.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
better surf. But,
Exactly. It's also got the industry too.
Yeah.
Like the surf industry, I'm sure California, I'd love to know the stats on this, but I'm sure California, the state, probably makes millions of dollars a year just off surf tourism. Just, all the money coming into surf shops,
Yep.
all the money coming into the business
Yeah.
as well. As the East Coast, it's maybe just a smaller scale. We still have a
Yeah.
lot of surfers, especially in some portions like Florida, for
Yeah.
example, like Kelly Slater's from Florida.
Yeah, exactly.
Virginia Beach,
Yeah.
we have rippers all up and down this coast. Hatteras, getting down towards Hatteras, the Outer Banks, and you name them. There's big name guys on the
Coming
East
from
Coast
the East
too.
Coast. Yeah. It's kind of the same way when it's like skiing and snowboarding. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you look at some of the guys that grew up on the East Coast snowboarding and playing in the X Games. You know what I mean? They're not
Exactly.
snowboarding in the POW, like that's out in the mountains of the Rockies
Right.
and stuff like that. Granted, it's a little bit easier to travel and stuff like that. But I'll tell you what, Brian, I've scored some of my best surfing days
Oh, me too.
on the East Coast. You know what I mean? And it just depends on the situation. And that's what kind of makes it fun. I think that's what makes the East Coast gets you something excited about too,
Yeah.
because you kind of know and can lean on the fact when I lived on the West Coast, there would always be waves.
Always be waves.
I can't tell you. I don't even think I would look at the surf forecast on the West
You
Coast.
just show up.
I would just go.
Yeah.
And that was partly because I was a beginner and new to the sport, and I didn't really care about if it was going to be
Right.
big or not, if I was going to score or not. I just knew that, hey, I wasn't working today.
go
I'm
have
going to
fun.
go hike. I'm going to go surf. And then I would look at a break. If there's waves there, I'd go. If not, I'd go somewhere else and see if there'd be some other waves. So I think that's is a little unique and maybe special part about the East Coast is that everyone's itching, and it keeps everyone wanting more in a
Yeah.
way, but in a good way. You know
Right.
what I mean? You scored on that one day. When's the next one?
Yeah.
And
hold
that's all
that-
you're thinking about.
Hold that thought. We're going to get back to that. Quick break, real quick, and then we'll have our final thoughts. I really want to get back into this surfing kind of addictive state,
Yeah, of
because it
course.
really is an addiction
Yeah.
to,
Oh, yeah.
to people. So
Oh, yeah.
we will be right back, everybody. Hang tight. All right, we're back, everybody. We are going to talk really quickly kind of about the addiction of surfing, because that's one thing where I guess the East Coast and the West Coast can both kind of come to an agreement on.
Oh,
If
yeah.
they're of all the differences, the coastline, the type of waves, the point break, shore break, sandbars, whatever the case may be, huge areas of industry for surfing on the West Coast versus maybe the smaller scale
Yeah.
of the East Coast. Not as consistent waves on the East Coast, more consistent on the West Coast.
Yeah.
All of these things, everyone can agree on one thing, and that is surfing kind of brings up this spiritual feeling
Yeah.
to a lot of people. And I think it's kind of like an addiction. in a
Yeah,
way.
and we talk about the biggest threats of storms and hurricanes. We always say is water.
Yeah.
Right. So you think about the amount of power that the ocean has, and surfing is a way. No matter what time of surfing, or no matter what type, I should say, water sports in general has a way of connecting you to something that is and will be always more powerful than you.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a way that's very humbling. I always used to say when I'd be having the best day, things were going great. Things at work went great. Things personally going great. I said, what would make today just even better if I scored some great waves.
session.
And I would go out there and then I would just get crushed and annihilated. And the ocean was always there to put me back in my place, to kind of humble me a little bit and say, hey, no, you know, like you check yourself a little bit,
Yep.
you know? And that I think is very, very unique about it. And I think that's what draws people in, because you're never fully in control.
No.
I mean, yes, you are when you're riding a wave here or there, but
Are you
never
really?
are you really?
Yeah.
Never fully
Especially
in
on a
control.
big day.
You know, so that I think is a very indescribable feeling, maybe that most people experience when they're surfing and they
Yeah.
try to get out there. I mean, I'll use this as an example. Jack O'Neill wetsuits, the O'Neill brand. I mean, he started up the wetsuit when he lived on the West Coast. Pretty sure his house is still there. That first break I told you about, called The Hook on 41st Avenue, Santa Cruz, Capitola, a couple blocks away from that, there was his house right perched up on the coast. And he used to just watch all the surfers out there and have a good time in his older age. But there was a plot of land, it was called the Dirt Farm is what they kind of called it. And it was a spot with a few staircases down to the beach break. When Jack O'Neill passed, he had, I'm pretty sure he put it in his will or something or the other. The company made sure that plot of land would never go developed, and that would always be available for the public to access the ocean.
That's awesome.
Because that was the way to get people and to keep people connected to the world around them, you know? So I think that just speaks in itself.
And especially in such a crazy world, kind of flipping the script, and you've had a great day, let's make it even better. What if you had a bad day? Maybe you're stressed out about something. There's always there's always something that surfing can do to kind of release all that stress for even if it's temporary, and to kind of, bring a little bit of light to your day and to kind of show you, hey, I got a couple waves today.
Yep.
I made it through my day and I capitalized with a fun little right hand point break.
Yep.
Or a dumpy little sandbar on the East Coast.
It works.
You
It's a
got
way
into
to
the
catch.
water and you felt the motion of the ocean.
Yes.
So
that's why I'll never understand if I ever meet a grumpy surfer.
No,
What are you
yeah.
upset about? What are you cranky about? They're having their coffee and be like, man, it was better yesterday. You know what I mean? Just get out there. I always say, is it better than staying dry?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's better than staying dry.
100%. So, I mean, if that's one thing to end it on, it's that I think there are more similarities than you would think between the East Coast and the West Coast. Sure, maybe the shape of the coast, all the sciencey aspects of
The
getting
big waves and not waves, and this and that. But we're
there's
all out
one-
there for the same reason, right?
It's hey, that's the saying. It's one ocean.
Yep.
Everybody's connected when they get into the water. So that's kind of what we want to leave you guys with. Great time to chat
love
with
it,
you,
man.
Steve.
I want to come on next week.
This was fun.
Yeah.
This was fun. We'll do it again. And hopefully everybody enjoys themselves, and hopefully we all get through this flat spell here in Virginia Beach, because
I haven't asked you yet. That's one thing I always ask Brian when I come into the weather center. Any waves anytime soon?
We're going to get through it together. Hey, September is going to be here before we all know it. So hang tight, everybody. Thanks for joining us this week on Hang 10. We'll see you next week.